need some bit of sorting out and
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
like that. So yeah, but well, we're back. We're back
Back.
for episode 8 now.
8, yeah, it'd be 8, what? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we I suppose we got to a point where we'd actually finally met after all this time and what we'd done. So,
Mm.
um, I'm sure there was many a different uh, interaction. I think we had a few interactions briefly. I remember meeting you at Snowbox. Oh, am I allowed to say that? I'll have to bleep it out if I'm not allowed to say it.
I think we can say it
Yeah, yeah,
because I
why
was
not?
thinking that in the last episode. Like, there's nothing untrue about it. So
No, no,
yeah.
no, no, no. Like
Mm.
I was involved with Snowbox for 10 years, basically.
Mm.
A big festival in the French Alps, and it is one of those things. So
Mm.
um, yeah, so we met there. My first our first interaction was there, and then yeah, we jumped in that car, disappeared off to Val Thorens for 2 weeks or something ridiculous. Lived on
Mm.
top of each other, um, and then I think there was my brain kind of skips around the years and the times and whatever, but there was a few instances where we worked together quite a lot. Like if I was on a deployment, you tended to be on a deployment,
Yeah.
um, and I remember one of the hardest ones was I'd driven out. Do you remember I drove? So back in the UK we had another festival going on, another event, and you guys all deployed out
Mm.
for one of these varsity weeks, one of these big Oxford and Cambridge weeks, and I vividly remember us being really short on that. I got left behind to run that event,
Mm.
and we got there, and me and another member of staff, another one of the other management, as it were, you know, we used management loosely because it was ultimately, let's be honest, 13 a while we didn't really have management. It was just us doing it, um, and we ended up being maybe 14 or 15 people short for this event.
Really?
Um,
If it's the one I'm thinking
yeah,
of, I can't. The
um,
varsity one at VT,
um,
where you drove out like 24 hours
no,
straight.
yeah. So the event I was already at.
Oh,
Um,
you meant out in the Alps, like the varsity out in
so
the
I was
Alps
already
week?
no, the event I was running. We were 15 people short,
Right.
because ultimately one of the guys that was out in the Alps with you at the time,
Mm.
um, he'd offered to provide us some staff,
Mm.
and his staff never turned up because they um, to cut a long story short, the night before they were supposed to turn up to our event, they'd all been arrested at their nightclub. Um, and he failed to tell us
I
this.
remember
And
that.
so when we came to the day, we were like 15 people short. So
Is this the
we
person
had a
whose
long.
name is initials as DS?
It is indeed, yeah,
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 yeah. I think we can say that,
um,
right? I mean, that's
yeah,
fine because sometimes I'm going to have to figure out who you're talking about.
yeah, yeah. So and then so I did that event. That was like a warehouse hangar type club night event thing with
Mm.
like 5,000 people. Halloween, maybe? No, it must have been later than Halloween because it must have been end of November. Um,
Yeah.
and then yeah, I drove out. Like I jumped in the car after that event at like maybe midnight, and
Mm.
I drove out to the Alps. Ready, I did like 24 hours of driving to get to Val Thorens to meet up with the rest of the team. And I think at that time the team was probably at maybe 15, 16 strong.
Well, I remember aspects of that night, but not. I can't piece it all together. But all I remember, I can't remember who was even out there. But I remember that it was like, oh, Emmett's here now, and it was like 1 a.m. or something. You'd finally turned
Yeah,
up.
I turned up at like halfway through the shift had started.
Yeah, or maybe it wasn't that late. It was like midnight or 11 or something. And
Mm.
like, Emmett's here, Emmett's here. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I walk down those long stairs and that escalator to come and find you because there's a massive queue going.
Opening party or something happening.
Yeah, I think that was the one where that Jax Jones was playing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah.
And I've got some pictures from that night. But like, I walked down all of those stairs to go and meet you, and I'm like, "Oh, you're right, mate," and you're there in your shorts, which you'd been in. Maybe that's like the first. I don't know. Maybe the first time I'd seen you in shorts out in the Alps. I can't remember, but you were there in your shorts, and you were just really like spaced out, and you're like, "Oh, mate, I've been driving for 24 hours or something." I was like, "Really?"
Yeah, yeah. I think I got about 50 minutes sleep on the ferry.
Mm.
But yeah, then we had, and then I think, looking back on it, I was tired. I was irritable. Um, but there was quite a lot going on. I don't think I was scheduled necessarily to work that shift
Mm.
because I wasn't supposed to be there in some respects. But they, I ended up getting involved in all sorts of problems, and we ended up like as normal, lots of antisocial behaviour happening and lots of parties happening and dealing with things at nightclubs and whatever. And we used to have a really horrible night, if I remember rightly. It was quite a long, drawn out night.
Mm.
And we had the army in town. The army had like a load of squaddies out in town doing a ski um, exercise of some description, and they were out partying and causing chaos.
Was that on that night?
That was that night, mate. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I did. So I seem to think it was like remember it as a different night.
Um, so, I mean, no, sorry. That night itself might not have been the night of the incident, but that was kind of like how that evening sort of started.
Right. Okay.
How that
That
week
week.
started.
That week started. Yeah. 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 Because like we were saying in the last episode, we can't really remember. I certainly can't remember linear timeline of what happened when. It's just sporadic moments and it jumps all over the place. So I think,
Yeah,
over the years when we've told like people some of these things and when we're going to tell some of these things over these podcasts, they're going to jump all over the place, aren't they? Because there's
yeah,
no
yeah.
way I
Well,
can remember how it pieced together.
the actual night of the incident, as it was,
Mm.
that was the last night. That was the last evening. Um, because I remember it sparked off because it was the night before we were all supposed to go home or go to wherever we were going to our next deployment or whatever. Um, so it was probably Saturday night,
Mm.
and I remember the incident happened because we'd had a long week, we'd had all the problems, we'd had all the army in town, and ultimately what happened was I got into a altercation with one of the squaddies that was out in town because we were all trying to go. We were just finish our shift. Everyone's tired. Everyone's like, "Oh, finally, it's over." Um, we are about to go to bed, and we're having a little bit of a. There's me and maybe two others having a mini little debrief in the corridor,
Mm.
um, and we were interrupted by this guy screaming in the hotel, and he comes right past us, and he sort of um, screams whilst we're in the middle of this, like we're in a really quiet conversation, but he starts screaming,
Mm.
and I just sort of went, "Excuse me, mate. Do you think you can keep it down?" I said, "You've been here all week. You've been caused. We've had to deal with all this nonsense, all your screaming, all your shouting, all your chaos, all week. Um, People are trying to sleep. It's like 4 or 5 in the morning. Can you just keep it down and go to your room?" Um, and he kind of didn't really react in a offended manner. He acted a really like the way I took it was a very threatening manner. Was that he sort of went quiet, stared us up and down, looked at our room doors like the 0012, 0013, 0014, whatever it was, um, pointed at them and in a really threatening manner went, "Okay, I'll remember these doors." But, oh, sorry. I've got your room numbers. We'll be coming back here.
Is that what he said?
Is what he said.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
And he was
And
on
then
his
started to
own.
walk off. He was on his own
Mm.
and walked off to like the stairwell, which the stairwells were like, has a bit of context, but they're like spiral, internal concrete stairs, but they're like encased. They're like, you know, they're in like concrete cylinders, as it were, and they're built inside these things. And he walks off and to go to his room. And I, you know, was not the most pleased with his response because I felt like he was making an unnecessary threat to us. And bear in mind, the people in the rooms had nothing to do with it. It was if he, you know, so I just went to the stairwell where he was in, and he was about 3 or 4 steps down. And I said something along the lines of, "No, no, 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 no. You're not going to threaten us." I said, "If you've got a problem, me and you can sort it now." And he sort of stood there really quietly for a second. And I went, oh, okay, fair enough. And turned around to walk out the door. And at that point, he then, from like 3 or 4 steps down of this stairwell, grabs hold of my feet and pulls me over into the stairwell. And I'm like, oh, okay, we're actually in a, I don't know. It's like, so I'm now laid, as he's pulled me over, I've rolled onto my back. And I'm like, oh, shit. And he then starts to try like wrestle with me and throw punches and whatever. So I ultimately pulled him forward with my feet into what like I would class as into my guard and wrapped him up. And I'm starting to like wrestle his hands off me now. At this point, Ant's seen this altercation happen, and he's trying to get through the door. But me and this squaddy are now in a full-on grappling match inside the door on like 4 feet of concrete platform, and Ant pushing this door, and eventually he slides us both down the stairs. So me and this lad now roll down the stairs like these concrete all the way to the next floor.
Yeah.
Whilst we're still sort of like entangled up grappling and whatever. And I mean, I'll give him his due. Like he knew what he was doing. I felt like I knew what I was doing, and yeah, it kind of spiraled a bit out of control, and we got out of this corridor thing, and we ended up in a full blown like fist fight in the corridor. Sorry, in a hotel like floor.
Can I add in something?
Go for it. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course. Yeah.
This accommodation, every single accommodation in the Alps is bloody weird, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's like it's just weird. You can't even do it justice. I recommend Googling some of these accommodations because they're so peculiar. But this one was one of the weird ones. I can't remember the name of it now. You probably do.
It was something Blanc.
Chevron Blanc?
Chevron Blanc?
Maybe Chevron Blanc.
Chevron Blanc.
So if it was, Google that, listeners. Chevron Blanc. This one, it had, I remember these weird suspended platforms across, it was like this huge atrium, wasn't it? And it had these suspended platforms that were like health and safety nightmare death traps. But obviously,
do you know what it reminded? Do you know what it reminded me of?
What's that?
You know that the painting with all the staircases. Asher.
Usher.
Asher.
Yeah, Usher.
Asher. Yeah. That one. It reminded me of that. That one.
It is. That's a good example actually. And then when you're saying these stairwells that you, this is what I wanted to say. You're saying you got pinned in, and just to elaborate, like you're saying, ants like pushing the door. Yeah, these spiral staircases in these columns that run down the middle of the atrium. So when you're in the atrium, you just see these kind of like tubes,
concrete pillars,
concrete pillar tubes, but inside the stairs, and then doors, on each level open up, but they open up onto a, what would you call it? Not an atrium, like a walkway. Suspended walkway.
And then like a balcony that you can it's almost like walking onto a balcony that you can look up, and internally that it's full on atrium, and you can look over each side and see all the way to the bottom.
That's it. And the reason I want to highlight that is because it's probably the most dangerous place to get into a fight in like a million suspended. It's. I tell you what, it reminded me of is Star Wars. You know, the one where he's like, "I'm not your father," and he cuts his hand off.
Yeah,
and they're like hanging off of they're having
yeah.
lightsaber battles on these like suspended atrium walkway things like that, and you're watching it.
Yeah.
That's super sketchy. That is what this building is like, you know.
And also, if you look over the side of it, and you were like, "Oh, there, look, we need to go to that next floor down." It wasn't as if every staircase ran to every floor. You could go into a staircase and go, "Oh, we're going to go down," and then you pop out and you'd be like, "This isn't the floor we wanted to be on."
Yeah, it would miss. You would have to go down one to go up another to get to like the third floor or something, wouldn't you? It was really weird.
But anyway,
I just wanted to like express how dangerous and weird the layout of this space
so
was.
we've rolled down this set of concrete stairs, and we've sort of spat out at the bottom of like onto another floor. And obviously, it probably took a few minutes for anyone else who had seen this altercation start to arrive down on the next floor down. And at the time, it was only our team. There was nobody else there. It was just our team. 5 or 6 people had turned up and like, "Oh, there's a fight going on." But in fairly gentlemanly fashion, or maybe like the way I would describe it as like Alps rules fashion, Anthony, the boss, saw that it was just me and this guy. And so everyone that wanted to get involved was stopped. And like, no. It's a fair fight. Leave them to it. So we got into this like fight and whatever, and I eventually got to the point where I got him like wrapped up, pinned up against the wall, threw a few punches, a few knees. He sort of submitted, covered up, and well, just as that was happening, a gentleman arrived that was on our team. He'd taken very offence to this happening. I'm not sure why, because it had nothing to do with him. And he did try and get involved, and he was sort of like restrained by our guys. Like, no, leave it to happen. And the guy like covered up and was then no longer what I would deem intelligently defending himself. He just covered up into like a fetal turtle position, and I left him.
You said
I think he admitted defeat.
You said earlier like he was competent at fighting in some way. Do you think that was just squaddy training, or
Maybe.
he actually done a bit of martial
No, I
arts
think
or something?
he'd just been in fights before. I think he understood what he was doing.
Right.
Like I don't think he understood. I had the high ground,
Yeah.
but I think he understood. He'd been in fights before. I think he'd scrapped with people before. He could throw a punch,
But he wasn't like an MMA,
you know.
like
I don't think so.
No.
But
so
I think probably thought he was and whatever.
Right.
But anyway, he ultimately submitted, and I stopped him. And I'm cuts and my bruises, and he had his cuts and his bruises, and we walked away as like, and I thought it was over. And I was like, cool, perfect. To sort of then jump a tad bit ahead, because there was obviously a bit of adrenaline going, and you sort of like, okay, cool. We walked back up the stairs. We went to our room, and I got it ready. I got into bed basically. I was like, right, I'm going to bed. And a few minutes sort of passed by, and I'm kind of like semi about to fall asleep, and our doorbell rings on the thing, and I can't really describe it to this day really how it was, but the only way I can sort of explain it is the way the doorbell rang. There was panic in that in the amount of times the doorbell was pressed.
Yeah.
Like if you were to knock on someone's door in panic, you would, that was what the doorbell was doing.
It wasn't like ding dong. It was like ding 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 ding, like that kind of thing. A bit more.
Yeah, basically it was like I sort of sat up in bed and went, oh, that doesn't sound good. So I went down. I just had my shorts on. I opened the door, and I was met by a member of the team. big Scottish bloke, and he just said to me, "Oh, Emmett, I'm not gonna try and do a Scottish accent. It would probably be far better with a Scottish accent." But
Yeah.
he goes, "Oh, Emmett, there's some lads here to see you,"
Mm.
and I went, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And I sort of peered out the door, and what was there? 20 squaddies waiting outside.
Well, I didn't know at this
Um,
point. I didn't know at this point.
oh yeah, you didn't know at this point. There was like 20 lads waiting outside this on this atrium like walkway thing.
Mm.
And it's like, oh god, here we go. Right, okay. And you know me, mate. I didn't. It was I caused the fight. Well, I did. It was my fight to fight, and I was
Mm.
like, okay. And I just said to the Scottish bloke who came to the door, and I went, cool, give me a minute.
Mm.
So I grabbed my hoodie and I put my hoodie on, and I said I need to put my trainers on. So I put my trainers on, and I didn't at the time necessarily. I didn't expect anybody to come out and no, well, actually, no. What I didn't want to ask anybody
Mm.
to come and assist me. I was like, I'm not going to ask anybody. It's not their problem. They didn't cause this. So I'd got myself hoodie on, trainers on, shorts on, and I went, okay. And as I'm kind of walking out the door to go, like, I was like, this is going to go not brilliantly for me, but to confront these 20 trained soldiers that had decided to come and find me,
Mm.
I kind of, take a deep breath and go, I was like, hope these guys are going to follow me out this door.
And bear in mind, this is like 5 a.m.
It's 5 a.m.
So you're
And
like,
yeah, I'm like, don't need this now. But anyway, I walked out, and I was like, I kind of secretly hoped that the team spirit would go, Emmett needs our help. But
Yeah.
I didn't turn around and go. I specifically didn't go. Excuse me, guys, can you all just come out with me to get into this like 20-man brawl on the in the hotel? So I kind of was prepared to walk out to my death, and I got out there, and I was initially like out there on my own, which felt like forever. It might have only been a few seconds, but I was like, "Oh, this is not going to go well." And as I was about to like speak or do anything before anything could even really happen, other people started to appear. And think Ant was there to start with. Ant turned up, and then as almost like in a movie, like slow motion, more and more of our bodies started to arrive, and I was like, "Oh, thank God for that."
well, shall I fill in the gaps from
Yeah, go for it. Yeah,
my perspective? Is that so? First to say, this is something that happened later on in our careers, wasn't it? Together, our time together. So at this point, you and I were pretty like tight. We'd done a lot of deployments together, but there was a big team out that deployment, and generally a pretty solid team. Even the people on there that we maybe had nitpicky issues and things with, like they're all right. You know what I mean? They weren't like diabolical. There was no real, terrible people on that deployment. It was like a fairly good deployment. So, the room, most of us are in this one accommodation. Again, it's like probably meant to house, 3 people comfortably, but it's actually there's 6 people crammed into this apartment. And reflecting on this building, this apartment we're in, it's got these weird multi-levels. There was this, so you and I were in the same apartment, but I was up in this sort of like attic room, wasn't I, where my bed was?
Yeah.
And I was with Joe in that room.
Yeah.
We'll mention his name. And he...
Maybe we beep out his surname.
Oh, right, well, yeah, Joe. I was with Joe. Yeah. That's a bit of work for me. Joe. So, I was with Joe, this guy, Bristolian dude. We got to tell these bits about him because this is part of the story, right? Like, I'm in the room with him. So his bed's there, my bed's there, and I'm a massive fan of Star Trek. So I come back after this long ass shift, and I'm tired, and this was the time where I was going through that breakup as well. So I remember being in like a real sort of like miserable place, and I think that's why I was watching Star Trek, because Star Trek's like my comfort food. So I was on like Netflix out, it just got back. I was like, oh, I'm looking forward to watching a Star Trek. It cheer me up a little bit. So I'm sat there watching it with my headphones in, and then Joe comes in, and he's sort of like mouthing something to me, but I can't hear him because I've got the headphones in. And I pull one out, and I'm like, what? What's that, mate? And he's this like, how do you say, like smooth talking Bristolian dude. His voice is very smooth, isn't it? He's like, you alright, mate? He's like, oh, you alright, mate? Like that. So he's like, he just goes to me, come on, mate, Emmett needs us. In this really calm manner. So I didn't get any sense of urgency or danger, Emmett needs us. I'm like, oh, right, what do you mean he needs us? I think we've finished our shift, what's going on? He didn't say anything, he just goes, come on, mate, Emmett needs us. Come on. I'm like, oh, okay then. I'm in my pyjamas, I'm in my PJs by now. So, thank God, I remember having this like split second moment or decision where I'm going, do I need to put like clothes on for this, or do I just walk out in these PJs, which at the time consisted of like shorts and a t-shirt? Do you know what I mean? Like, and they were bright coloured like surf shorts that I had on as well. And I was like, oh, I better put some trousers over the top and the bomber jacket that we used to wear. So I put those on, and then I come out of our little attic room door, and then I see all of the troops amassing, and they're all walking down from all the different parts of the apartment, and it's like we're walking down in this line, and we come out the front door. I have no idea what's going on, no idea, and I'm going, what the hell is going on? Like everyone's like gathering together and amassing for something. And then, I remember it in my head like it was a movie. I walk out the front door, and there's this lineup of like squaddies on this suspended walkway balcony. They're one side, and then our guys start lining up along the other side. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, this isn't good. This is not good. 5 minutes ago, I'm watching like utopian, chilled Star Trek in my brightly coloured surf shorts, and now I'm like probably going to get filled in. It's just like out of the pan into the fire. So then I'm lined up across from one of these squaddies, and I'm sort of looking at the lineup. And I don't think this is how it actually was, but this is how my mind remembers it. It's where there's the one with the funny eye. It's like like the standoff in like the Western films where it's like, and there's one guy there with like a gammy eye, and then there's one guy weird looking who's like twitching and just like egging for the fight, And I'm trying to sort of size them all up and go, are these lot a threat? Do we have? Because I'm gathering now, a fight is going to happen. It looks like we're lining up for some random standoff fight. And I'm going, have we got the manpower? Have we got the guys capable of taking them on? And then I start looking and go, well, that one's actually a kid. He's probably only 16.
Well, this was it. This is what happened. Was ultimately that to sort of give the context of it was that after the initial altercation, the guy had gone back to his apartment, like battered and bruised. Like I was battered and bruised. It was a fight,
Yeah.
And he then decided to tell everybody in his apartment that the reason he was battered and bruised was because all of our guys, like the 6-7 guys that were ultimately watching a fight happen, jumped him and beat him up. And he had managed to survive this like 6-on-1 kind of like, beating. And that's why. So then obviously they'd all got riled up and returned back to our apartments because he remembered where we lived.
Mm.
Um, and and as I was out there when I initially walked out, I was amassed by 20 people of like, oh shit, this is not good. But as things started to unfold a little bit, you start to like pick them apart and go, oh, I don't think they want to be here. You know, some of them, there was definitely some of them that didn't want to be there. They were just there because they had been told they had to be there.
They were the equivalent of me. You know, one of
Yeah,
them was probably in their gym jams 5 minutes earlier watching Star Trek. And he's
yeah,
the
yeah,
next
yeah.
thing he's been dragged out and he's like, I don't really know what's going on here. But the difference was we were all over the age of 18. Easy.
Yeah, that's
There
it.
was no one there that was that young.
We were all grown men, you
We
know,
were all grown
and
men, whereas like the squaddies, some of them were blatantly like 16, you know, they bought a
16,
few,
17.
yeah,
Yeah.
a few real young ones out.
And I don't necessarily, and then, so then they're like, you know, in sort of quite traditional military fashion, the boss stands up and starts giving his like drill sergeant style speech at me and
Yeah.
at us. And I'm sort of going, and I interrupted them. Oh, hang on. The only people that got into a fight were me and him. As you
Mm,
can see, me and him are the only ones with injuries. Nobody else is injured.
mm.
It was a one-on-one fair fight, and it was kept that way. Um, and then Ant stepped in and sort of like did his like salesman speech
Mm.
and smoothed it all out, you know, because and we got it to that point where it was a bit like they were all starting to turn and look at him, going, "Why have you dragged us out of bed for getting into a fight and making us look like dicks?"
Well,
And
can I
all our guys
elaborate?
were sort of, "Yeah, go for it, yeah."
Because that's the bit. It's like I'm there, not a clue what is gone on or going on, and then their squaddy, their sergeant, whatever he was, starts chops him off. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he was wound up and he was quite aggressive, wasn't he? And
Yeah,
I remember him being quite a short guy, quite short.
yeah. Short, dark haired,
Yeah,
sensible shoes, North Face jacket.
that's it. And I remember him kind of delivering it in this really weird kind of manner, like he kind of
Like
goes.
he was addressed, like he was addressing the troops.
Like he was addressing the troops. It was really odd because he sort of like, but he did it so dramatic, like it was a movie. It's like it had these
Yeah,
pauses and stuff in it. He goes, "We're out here doing our ski
mm.
trip or something. Your guys have come." You know, he's like all these pauses and stuff in there. It was really, and he was getting more and more wound up. And then,
It's like he'd rehearsed it on the way up.
yeah, that was it. That was it. He must have. Because he gave this really weird delivery at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm half asleep, but my adrenaline's pumping now, and I'm going, "What the hell is going on?" As I start to then figure out, oh, there's been some altercation, some ruckus happened. You know, start piecing it together. Then, did you say you spoke first?
I think so, because he sort of said that we'd like he'd insinuated that we'd all attacked this kid, this guy.
Right,
Um, and
right.
when I say kid, we were probably very similar ages. I mean, at the time, I was probably what 20,
Yeah,
26, something like that.
he wasn't one of the
Um,
like 16-year-olds that were in there. He would have been like
no,
20 something, but he was
yeah,
younger.
um,
And then but then yeah, because I don't seem to remember you talking. I just remember Ant coming in and doing his speech.
yeah.
And that's the thing we say
Um,
about Ant. He's a good salesman.
maybe I spoke before Ant arrived because I was as soon as I got out there and I was like stood there going, oh, I was like, where the
Right,
fuck
right,
is
right,
everybody
right.
else?
Yeah,
You know,
maybe.
that's when I'd established that he'd told everybody that he'd been jumped by us and beaten up, and
Yeah,
I was going, whoa, hang on, no, that's not what happened. Like, me and him are the only ones that got into a fight. We're the only ones with injuries, and
yeah.
then Ant appeared, and everyone, and I'm sort of going, and then he got into his sort of like politician style like speech, and then Ant comes in and starts like give his side of it, and like, no,
Because that's what I remember. Again, I can't remember exactly what Ant said, but I remember, like I say, and that's why we see he's a good salesman. He's got the gift of the gab as Ant, and he
yeah,
gave. But also, we were not in the wrong. You were not in the wrong. So it wasn't like he was lying and bullshitting. He basically just, but he gave a really good speech. I remember it was like a good speech, and this
yeah.
you could see the expression in this sergeant's face go as the realization that like, oh, it's my little shitty
Yeah.
private that has like caused this.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I think as well, there's always that guy on your team who is the troublemaker, the trouble starter. And it's probably that kid. So he probably
Yeah.
goes, yeah, it is private Johnson. Johnson's always starting some shit. You could see the sort of like blood drop from his face, couldn't you? And he was like, oh.
So, yeah, he was like, the realization hit him that he'd been brought to this altercation, this conflict for no reason. It was not an attack on his guys. It was his guy being an idiot.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like, there was probably a position where I could have walked away from that at some point and gone, it's not worth doing, blah, blah, blah. But we got beyond that point. And, but yeah, and then as it started to simmer down and then realised that they were, like in the wrong, and the member of staff that had tried to get involved previously, just so happened to be the last person out of the apartment as well.
Yeah.
Sort of like boulders into the conversation in like his own manner, and starts screaming and shouting at everybody, but also particularly like random people that weren't there. And we were like, oh, this is going to spark off again now.
Well, because he was an ex-squaddy, wasn't he?
Yeah, so he sort of tried to, I think he sort of was trying to deal with it in his own sort of like ex-squaddy manner. And it was very much like, this has been solved now. We don't need to. And at the end of it, once it all settled down, we'd actually got to the point where me and the lad that we had the initial fight with went to one side, because we said, look, if you want to square this up, we'll square it up now. And I said, I'll happily speak to him. And I said, look, I'm happy to speak to him, and I'm happy to fight him, whichever one he wants to do.
Yeah.
I said, we'll go over there. You guys can stand and watch. I don't give a shit. Like, we'll do this, we walked over to one side, had a little conversation. He decided he wanted to like fix it verbally. So we shook hands and we walked away from it. And then everyone dispersed off and went back to bed.
Well, when the team member of ours, the ex-squaddy, he chimes in after Ant's finished his speech. And this is the bit I remember is like, you can feel the tension. Like I was saying, the sergeant's face, he's like, Private Johnson, you little shit. And he did get alphaed. He did get alphaed, didn't he? Because you could tell he was like, oh, right, okay. Because he'd given that such good sort of like movie passionate speech before about how we were such dickheads and we wronged them. But to his credit, he was like, I'm in the wrong. You've proven me wrong. And he was sort of like calming down, and he was like, okay, right, fair enough, yeah. And I was like, thank God we're not going to get into a fight here. I was like, thank God, Ant, you diffused that nicely. It's like, can go back to bed and watch Star Trek now. And then our member steps in, starts chops it off, and you can feel the tension rise again, can't you? And I was just like, oh no, like I was like, shut up. Like I do not want to get into a fight. And I don't know whether it was like an ego thing with him from being an ex-squaddy or something, like wanting to have the final word, or if wasn't there some like beef between regiments or something like that?
I think if I remember rightly, it was an engineers group that was out, and I don't know whether it was his regiment or another regiment that that group was a part of, and I don't know whether he felt like they were being disrespectful to his regiment, or whether he had the thing with like they're my adversarial regiment, and therefore I'm going to have the last word. But there was something there because it had been going on all week.
Right, yeah, because I wasn't too aware of that. I wasn't really aware of that so much, and like I just remember thinking, I don't really care about your regiment. I just do not want to get filled in at 5 a.m. for when it's avoidable. It's like,
that's it.
Because that's the thing as well. When you're out there and you kind of go on shift, you sort of psych yourself up, don't you? And you're like ready for something to happen. But then by the time you've got back and you're in bed in your pajamas, you've sort of like chilled out. Then you're that mindset to deal with something like that is gone.
Yeah.
So you know, yeah, I was like, oh, if you'd got me like 3 hours ago, I'd have probably been prepared and ready for it. But
That's it. You kind of get back to the safe haven of your room and go,
yeah,
shift's over.
that's it.
The problem with living out where one of the issues we had for a long time when we lived out in the Alps, and we would have issues in regards to like working on the nightclubs out there or whatever, would be you'd have an issue at the beginning of the night. You kick them out. There's only your nightclub, one or two nightclubs around. Sort of 2 in the morning. They got nowhere else to go, so they come back. You kick them out. You bounce them back away from the door. They're there for another 2, 3, 4 hours or whatever, and then you close up and you go home. But like you live in that area. You literally live a minute's walk away from where you're working, and we had issues in the actual resorts where we were living sometimes, where one of our colleagues got into an altercation in a supermarket in the daytime because someone on a skiing holiday got kicked out of his bar. Some incident happened with them too. Fucked off for the evening, and then he's gone shopping at 11 a.m. in the morning to go get his food, and this guy's in the supermarket doing his shopping, and he's aggrieved by being kicked out of a nightclub, and starts a fight in the supermarket in the middle of a nice ski resort. And this guy's he just doing his job and went to the supermarket the next day and bumped into the guy.
That's the
so I understand.
Sorry, yeah, go on.
No, go on. You're all right.
No, I was going to say the crazy thing about the ski resorts is like the night and day difference. And most people go, oh, well, that's the same with the city, the town. Like in the daytime, the shops open, and the night is the club and carnage. But I'm like, nah. On a ski resort, it's more extreme because they're so picturesque during the day, aren't they? And there's kids going around with like their sleds and skiing, and it's so quaint and nice. And then in the evening, it's more extreme than any UK nightclub high street.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that you kind of like. I say like, for us on that with that instant, we'd finished our shift, we'd gone home, we're going to go back to bed, and you're staying in the same hotel as the people you're having issues with.
Yeah.
And he quite blatantly made a threat to us, that he was, I know which rooms you're in. I'm coming. We're going to be back here. I was like, oh, okay, cool. It'd be like standing outside your door, and in your house, and someone going, "I know where you live. Me and the boys will be back later on." And you're like, "Oh shit, okay."
That's the weird thing about.
Oh, sorry, mate. I'm going to say I appreciate that. There's sometimes when it comes to working in smaller places around the UK and stuff, that like you might not want to work on the pub that's just down the road from your house.
That's the weird thing about the I was going to say the lineup that we had on that job that time is that thinking about each one individually, not that you need to be the hardest bastard, right? But like each person individually wasn't as if we had like a lineup of killers, was it? But
no,
we knew that. But how someone looked to someone who knew nothing about them, I think we looked more intimidating. That lineup that we had on that night, like me, I'm not like, they didn't know I'd just come down from that room watching Star Trek. They probably didn't assume that I'm like the nerdiest nerd that's come down, and underneath my salopettes or whatever, that I've got these like bright yellow swim shorts on. To the 16-year-old kid that was opposite, I probably looked pretty intimidating. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And everyone else on that lineup, like, I know the Scottish guy that knocked on the door wasn't a fighter, but he was a big guy. He was big. And you would look at him and go, well, he's big. Do you know what I mean? So we were probably quite an intimidating lineup. Yeah, on that night. Yeah. But yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? That was one of the things that kind of annoyed me over the years as well, is that I understand there's limited accommodations and places that you can be put, but sometimes I was like, do you have to put us? You know, we're in that accommodation, and then the 5 apartments to our left and right are all of the students that
Yeah,
we.
that then at like 10 o'clock at night we kit up and go out and start knocking on their doors, going, guys, can you? Because I remember I don't remember what year it was, whatever, but
Yeah.
we were in the apartment with one of the unis that was it was rowdy, it was horrible. They'd
Mm,
set fire to stuff and they'd like throw. We had issues with them like setting fire to toilet rolls and hoiking them over the balconies and
mm,
destroying furniture and all the stuff that was all the antisocial behaviour nonsense
yeah.
that we had to deal with. And we were in that apartment block, so then during the daytime, you've got like I remember like sort of sitting in the apartment going, right, we'll go. It wasn't a case of we were like you were like physically scared of anybody because they were ultimately all students.
Mm,
But the last thing you wanted was to be, especially when you're working night shifts and you want to sleep during the day. The last thing we
mm.
wanted was to be harassed all day, you know, banging on the door, kicking on the door, having your kit stolen off the balcony,
Well, it, sometimes
all the silly stuff that just winds you up.
it's a
Because
numbers game sometimes, isn't it? You know, it's like there were times where it was me, you, and one other in an accommodation in the middle of all of these other students that aren't exactly trained killers, you know, and we're maybe more capable physically handling ourselves than they are. But if 5, 6 of them decide that they're pissed off because we've ruined their night by stopping
yeah,
their party early, and they want to even if they're not coming in to beat us up, they might just want to be dicks and throw something at our door. Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
just to play a prank on us or something. It's not
that's it.
nice, is it?
It was not ideal to
No.
be housed in the same accommodation sometimes. But
That's it. Mate, you said something just then that reminded me of a time and this was, I think, quite an early days one. Do you remember that kid that made the fancy dress costume, like the Roman, or was a room that made the Roman, what do you call them,
the
the toga
toga
bite
party.
out of the
Yeah,
pillowcases?
yeah.
Mate,
Yeah,
like,
chopped up the hotel bedding to make a toga.
yeah. Well, it was because they had these really weird. It wasn't like bed sheets, was it? It was the sofa. You know, you have like a sofa and you unzip the pillow things,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's like that thick kind of canvas material, and it was like this 1980s looking red weird pattern, and they obviously had no idea of how much they were going to get fined for that,
no.
because those outfits they were wearing, mate, were more expensive than Balenciaga, because
Oh, for the
for what
price that the hotel's charging for.
what they were going to get fined
Like
for that, mate, they could have bought 4 Versace suits to go out in that night.
so. Well, I saw a thing on recently that some hotel in Turkey, it's a really cheap hotel in Turkey that charges the customers when they leave for, 2 stolen towels and 2 stolen bed sheets and stuff.
Right.
Um, and I saw it and I was like, oh, do you know what? The Alps accommodation started that. That was,
That's their
you
scam,
know,
mate.
they would give these students these dirt cheap packages. Or well, the company would organise a really dirt cheap package for them to go out skiing for the week. And we used to get it at Snowbox as well. Every year, got to a point at Snowbox. I was like, guys, when you get into your room, film the bedroom. Do a video of the bedroom,
Mate.
of the apartment. Go around the apartment, video everything. And one of the things I always told them was lift up the beds and film the slats on the bed. And then when you leave, do the exact same thing and send me the videos.
Yeah.
Because every year after we'd finish Snowbox, everyone would get home, invoices are going, bills are going, and they'd be like, "Oh, we need to take your deductions off the invoice," and I'd be like, "Send me the deductions," and they'd be in almost every year for nearly 10 years. There was some argument that they wanted to, each bedroom had a bed slat broken at
Yeah.
20 euros a bed slat, and I'm like, you're joking, aren't you? Like, we've got 10 apartments and 30 bed slats broken. Are you kidding?
I knew as well, like, they were on a scam because often it was you, me, and one other in a room, right? So we
Yeah,
could keep an account for what had happened, and maybe one time there was something we damaged, and we go, okay, we're prepared for that. But every other time we knew we'd never damaged anything because we were really diligent about it, and we'd always get accused and fined for something.
yeah.
And you know, this is the thing as well, as it was like a bed slat's broken, €45, or a fork. If you know, a fork goes
Missing a 50 euro fork's gone missing.
€50 for like the cheapest fork, that you know, those crap cheap forks, and it'd be like €50. And we'd often see the students out on the night out with like a cup, wouldn't be a mug. There was the really
Yeah,
distinctive coffee cups that would come in the apartments because they're basically the cheapest, crappiest ones. And they just bought it out for the night with like some of their booze in. And I know you're not taking that back, and I know you think that that cup is 50p and it's not going to cost you anything, but you're drinking out of a €75 goblet there.
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
you do not want to lose that.
No, that's it.
So yeah, they would get fined. The thing is, the students, a lot of them were quite wealthy, so I think
Yeah, yeah.
they didn't care so much. But our staff were getting paid £10 an hour, weren't they?
At
And
the time, yeah, yeah.
some of them, yeah, maybe every now and then accidentally smashed a cup. You know, there were some things that got mentioned that we were like, yeah, that actually happened. But there was a ton of things on there that didn't actually, wasn't damage caused by us.
Yeah.
And but did it ever? I don't think it ever actually got onto the staff, did it? I think, did we absorb it?
Uh, yeah, we generally absorbed it, unless it was quite blatantly damaged. Like
Mm,
especially like and obviously we got to a point where we got a system in place where people would go and take pictures, take inventories, take videos. So it'd take a little while to go back and forth with the accommodation. But the moment you sent the 2 videos of them starting and finishing,
that was it.
that complaint would go away.
That was it. They just
But
tried it
if you knew
on.
someone, if you knew someone had like lost keys was the hardest. If you knew someone had lost a key, that was the hardest to like recoup.
Yeah, because that one was actually probably something that did happen. Losing keys probably
Yeah,
did actually happen quite frequently because that was quite easy to do, to lose a key. Because that's the other thing. There would be four of them in accommodation, and there would be two keys, wouldn't there? Sometimes
sometimes
one.
one key.
So when they're all finishing shifts at different times, and they've got to like swap it between themselves or hide it somewhere, a key's going to
Yeah.
go missing. But so yeah, the key thing, but a lot of the other stuff, like a lot
A
of
lot of the
the
other stuff was a lot of the other stuff was a scam,
yeah,
and it turns out that that's now practice in Turkey by the sounds of it. When you go to
right.
a
That's how they make their money.
five-star hotel for go to a 5-star hotel for £100 for the week, and
Mm.
you get charged for every towel that goes missing, and the bed sheets and all this sort of stuff. So that's been normal for 15 years in the Alps.
Do you remember the one in Val d'Isere? And there was that woman. She called you a. We don't know whether she called you a
She
duck
called me a bastard.
or a bastard.
Yeah,
Wasn't it?
kinda. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah, yeah.
all the annoying, weird trinkets that were in that room.
It was like living in like some 90-year-old's study. There
Yeah.
was just trinkets and little like things everywhere, and everything was covered in dust, and like it'd never been touched before. And
And there was those ski markers, the
yeah, some
poles, wasn't
antique
there? Like
ski
these.
markers and stuff. Yeah, all sorts
And
of stuff in there, and
so we got on that
you
job.
couldn't move without knocking something over.
No, because I remember in that one we were like, right, we we need to clear space in here because we're working out of that room. We've got like radios to charge. So at the end of every night, we didn't just have our 3 or 4 radios to charge. We had to take 20 radios off of the reps and charge them up for them at night. So we had 2 massive radio chargers on. We needed a table for that. We needed like a table for laptops and kit and paperwork and everything. So we get put into these really small accommodations in general anyway, but this one was even worse, wasn't it? So we're like, right, we've got to get rid of all of this stuff. So we put it all out on the balcony for the
Yeah,
week that we're there. And we had the plan of moving it back in before we go and putting it all back in place and everything. But they kicked us out of that room early, didn't they? You remember?
Yeah, she turned up at like 8 a.m. in the morning to kick us out.
Yeah. And we were like...
And we were like...
And I swear to God, she thought we were students.
Yeah.
And that's, we were going, no, we actually work... She said, why are you not out of this room? Well, we've been up till 5 in the morning, keeping your accommodation, safe and intact and protected from all of these students. We've been here, like, helping you, and now you're being a right arse to us. But she couldn't comprehend or understand it. She spoke English, didn't she?
Yeah, she did, but she swore at me a lot in French.
Yeah. So we're like, okay then, fine, we'll leave. So we just grab our stuff and go. And I seem to remember that was one where we got loads of false
fines and stuff.
For like, oh, this is broken. And I had, my ski markers were out on the balcony. It's like, yes, they were.
Anyway, shall we pick some up on the next one?
Yeah, pick up some more, alpine or security adventures on the next episode of the Always the Bad Guys podcast. Yeah, all right.
Should be on the next one, mate.
Yeah, speak to you soon. See you.